and welcome everybody to this week's cStor TechWise. As the series evolves, today's is going to be about extending your workloads up into the cloud. So with that, I'd like to do a quick intro as to kind of who cStor is. So we are a winning provider that has been in business for the last 15 plus years, really trying to provide best-of-breed technologies into our clients to meet business needs in a cost-effective manner. One key thing is we have a vendor-agnostic approach to the way we provide solutions for our clients. We want to take a step back, understand what our clients need, and then provide a solution that entails that. And always, we've got the mentality of putting our clients first. We look beyond IT slide here. We really exist to put people on a path to success, and this is our clients, our employees, and our partners. Below you see all the text and the beliefs that really define the culture of who cStor is. Really, 15 years ago, it was a couple of engineers running around doing the right thing for our clients, and we have since kept that culture and grown it into a business that's relevant in today's industry, as well as still practicing what we were doing back in day one 15 years ago. The solutions offerings that we have changed over those years. We used to be very heavy, just data center focused, but now we have newer and changed mentality and solutions that we provide. We've evolved with our clients and for the needs of our clients. Digital transformation, although this has a little picture of a cloud going to it, and today we're talking about going to the cloud, we believe that cloud is more of a consumption model than a physical location. So if your cloud is something that's inside the four walls of your data center or something that's external in somebody else's or even spanning between the two, again, we want to take the technologies that we provide and make sure they fit best for the consumption for you, your clients, your applications, and your databases. As well as that cybersecurity and converged infrastructure are two other focuses that we've had over the past few years. Cybersecurity has been a fun run for us, dabbling in kind of cool technology things that relate to security, as well as converged infrastructure, trying to get the most value out of what you have in your data center to your users and to your administrators, as well as to the business. Our service offerings on this slide, they really started way back when around the delivery, but they have augmented and changed to include cloud and consulting and optimization, data migration, managed services, with a little bit of staff augmentation that we provide as well. But really, we take all the things that we can provide with our own internal professional services and then mix that with our partners that we have, like you'll hear from today. We have a really wide breadth of being able to provide the services that are really needed for the business. This next slide I like to refer to as our NASCAR slide with all the different logos on there, so on and so forth. Really, this goes back to our agnostic approach, right? We want to go and listen to our clients, understand their needs, and take all of our partners, the hardware and the services and everything that we can do and provide a solution that's going to meet the business needs in a cost-effective manner. One of these that we're going to be talking about today is House of Brick. With an intro to House of Brick, I want to say that they're a partner of ours that have proven themselves in theory and fact, and we are proud to be associated with them. And with that, I would like to turn this over to Bob Lindquist with House of Brick to take it from here. Bob?
Thank you, Pete. Hello, everyone. This is Bob Lindquist. I am the Client Services Director for House of Brick Technologies. I'm responsible for the client and partner relationships in House of Brick's West region. cStor is one of our partners that probably over the last few years has been one of our top integration partners in helping provide database solutions in the data centers. And today we'll be talking a little more about how those data centers can be seen as private cloud on-prem options, or how you might integrate databases using some of the public cloud. I have Jim Hannon. He's one of our Oracle architects. Jim, you've been with House of Brick now a little over 10 years, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep, going on about 10 and I think 4 months. Yep.
Very good. And we appreciate you joining here with us. And to that end, Jim's only been at House of Brick for about half of what House of Brick's been in business now, going on nearly 20 years. House of Brick originally was focused on Oracle performance and integration, later adopted other technologies around database platforms like Microsoft's, VMware's, and most recently around cloud. But essentially looking at helping our clients optimize all facets of their database platforms. And the services we provide around database include integration, managed, and licensed services, licensing especially, which we'll talk about later this morning on this webinar. These are the key takeaways that we expect everyone can have. Underneath these are key themes, particularly around what House of Brick is seeing with our clients. One, that cloud is real, both private and public. Two, that database cloud is possible with the right architecture. And three, database cloud licensing is quote unquote doable with certain qualifications, some of which we'll discuss here later. Amazon just recently, I think it was last week, announced their recent earnings, which was approximately $4 billion for their second quarter of 2017. That's up 46% from a year ago. So they're scaling quite well over the last decade to become the predominant cloud services provider. Now, we mentioned Amazon, and we'll talk about databases on Amazon and other clouds later, but AWS, if it was a standalone business this year with its $16 billion in predicted revenue, would rank as a standalone Fortune 200 company separate from Amazon. In fact, Amazon is doing so well with their web services, they had over $900 million in operating income, which was more than all the other operating income from Amazon's other divisions combined. So Amazon's been doing very well with their cloud services offerings, and in fact, Gartner estimates that Amazon ran more than 10 times the computing capacity as the next 14 cloud providers combined. So when you're looking at your cloud strategy, private and public, Amazon's going to come up, and they're a space to watch. They're leading in many areas, including, as we'll talk about, some recent announcements that will be very attractive for many of House of Brick and cStor customers. Now, Jim, we've talked about this on past webinars and events together around some of the key cloud concepts, whether it's platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, software as a service. What are some of the common services you see some of the House of Brick clients using today?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you know, just starting off, when we put this slide together, part of our intent was to define, you know, what this all means. But there's a lot of buzzwords out here, and what we have on this slide really cuts to specifics about what the cloud can do. But certainly, we're seeing a lot of DR, disaster recovery as a service. Absolutely, software as a service is being rapidly adopted. I think probably at this point, most companies have some component of software as a service that they're utilizing today. And then I think the other big one quickly is infrastructure as a service. You know, you're really looking at, and we'll have another slide that will convey this, but you're really looking at the infrastructure is built, you're just deploying your application on top of it, which gives you that, yep, perfect.
Exactly, and for those who've been on LinkedIn, I think a few years ago, this same diagram went around to describe pizza as a service, whether you're making pizza at home or having Domino's deliver it because you ordered it online. Jim, as I think you were describing, each of these allow you to build cloud for how you want to do cloud, from on-prem 100% to 100% software as a service.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I've done similar presentations, one of the things that I like to note, so this is Microsoft put this together, but I thought it was really clearly defined what each of these of the major offerings really do. And so what you need to understand is that blue is what the customer would own, green is what the provider is offering. And what's important there is early adopters of cloud services have struggled with what part of the stack do they own versus the provider. And I think this defines it very clearly.
And we'll touch on many of the points, challenges, and even the cloud readiness checklist in terms of where some of our clients should look to be here. On the next slide, we've seen this technology adoption curve ever since we've been in business. And in fact, House of Brick is a big fan of Jeffrey Moore and his Crossing the Chasm writings. When House of Brick helped to pioneer Oracle virtualization, I think, Jim, it was 12 years ago we virtualized the initial Oracle workload out there. It took us a while for many of our clients to really understand what was real and what was FUD, that virtualization didn't mean that it wasn't going to be supported, that performance wasn't going to be good, and that you couldn't license it cost effectively. And I think now with cloud, what we're seeing is, in fact, I had a client just a few weeks ago, they're experiencing a similar cloud analysis paralysis. With this client, they had virtualized their environment, in fact, had built a private cloud, but as we were speaking with them and another known cloud provider, they just couldn't get over some of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that their database vendor was giving them if they were to call them and look to get the support they needed for running that database workload on this public cloud provider's environment. So we're seeing a lot of that FUD, and Jim, that's kind of similar to what we saw with virtualization in the early days.
Yeah, absolutely correct. We're seeing exactly the same patterns. Good point.
And that's the cue that you turn off your phones when you're presenting on a webinar. On this next slide, one of the things that we demonstrate with our clients is the need to define their cloud SLAs for the database workloads to align to their private cloud SLAs. And this slide, though we won't go into a lot of detail here, is very important because of many of the concerns we've seen around outages on Netflix, outages on other online stores. And if a client is to look at leveraging public cloud for their database workloads, they should make sure they have the guarantees that they're going to be prioritized appropriately, that they won't have to wait until all of the other clients' environments ahead of them, maybe the Disney Store, Target, Nike, Nordstrom, all who've experienced outages in the past. Okay, what if they go down? What if, does that mean I go down? Am I going to come up just as quickly as they do? So again, one of the most critical things we've seen with cloud is ensuring that the SLAs that you get, if you can even get them, will align to the SLAs, particularly for those tier 1 workloads that are business critical for your environment. So this, again, is just an important slide to call out. You need to look at SLAs alignment across your cloud architecture.
Yeah, and if I can add, Bob, on this slide, this is a snapshot, as you can see, of AWS outage in 2017. This is just one of the regions, and so why we point that out is had some of these vendors, customers that were using the AWS S3 cloud, had they built their application to spread across multiple regions, sure, there would have been an outage, maybe a slowdown with performance, but there wouldn't be, as you can see with those green lines, a total outage for them. So the point I'm making is architecture of your application in the cloud is really key.
Now, Jim, as we mentioned, software as a service is picking up just not in SMBs, but we're seeing many of our clients look at software as a service as an option to get off of an on-premise application, correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
And I think in our case, and I know you've been with some of my other clients, here in the West region for House of Brick, many clients will look at their, in one instance, their Oracle license agreement and see how much they're spending on, maybe it's their ERP system for HR or something else, and maybe they want to go to Workday or some other option where that software as a service will provide them not only the application but the management of the database. One of the key things to remember as people are considering software as a service options, whether to save in that licensing cost and the on-premise management or for any other reasons, is cloud providers are trying to provide every part of the stack. Oracle, as an example, recently acquired on this top bullet NetSuite to basically fill out their software as a service offering in their portfolio, which means now they're a direct competitor with Workday and many of those others in that space, and they're going to try to continue to compete with Salesforce as well as with Amazon, because Oracle for Oracle databases today really provides a full cloud as a service for databases, if you will, across all of those platforms. So that's a key consideration. Depending on the database you're using, the applications that require those databases, you'll need to see, one, what software as a service options they may provide, for example, SAP with SAP.com, and if you want to maintain that database offsite in that cloud provider, or if that's something you want to keep on-site because of regulatory or other reasons. Now, what is really being deployed in cloud? And Jim, here I have 3 clients, and I think you may be familiar with some of them, but what happens here is we'll see architectures, as we'll talk about here later, where vendors are describing what our clients should be doing in cloud today, particularly with their databases. What we've seen, I have one client, this first bullet, they went and they moved their database workloads, a small portion of them as a pilot, to kind of see how things would work. Well, they got their first monthly bill. That bill was for $1 million just for the cloud services. And when they did the math against 12 months, they figured that for a third of that 12-month cost, they could buy converged infrastructure, build their own private cloud on-premise, and deploy 100% of their workloads on that, and really save some cost. So first, clients aren't moving their tier 1 workloads to cloud because it's very expensive relative to what they could do on public cloud, not only because of cloud service, but because of licensing. Would you agree, Jim, at least for a first use case?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think Forbes.com has done an excellent job of following the cloud and predicting what's to come. But one of the things that one of their authors noted that is spot on is these cloud providers, they built these data centers, these regions, for tomorrow, meaning they're ready for a lot more capacity. So the reason Forbes pointed that out is what we'll start to see as more adoption takes place is the cost of running in the cloud will start to go down. And I think some of that savings will be passed on to the customers. Agreed.
Now, the other thing, secondly, here that we see is don't go to cloud if your private cloud doesn't have a strategy and governance model in place. The public cloud is not a magic wand. It's not going to fix any of your operational issues. It's not going to fix basically any of your business divisions, concerns, or needs without your integration, at least as a broker. So that's the second thing we've seen, particularly at one client. And then third, why move existing application to the cloud? I have a particular client here on the West Coast who was on a legacy platform for their Oracle environment. Their application provider for one of their applications had a software as a service option where they could migrate Oracle into a new virtualized environment on-prem and use the software as a service pointing back to that data, so they no longer had to manage the application and the updates. They just maintained the database. They were able to do that. House of Brick helped them to get there. And then the other application that they used on Oracle also moved off of the legacy platform into that same virtualized x86 environment. And then they moved that database into SQL Server because the application supported SQL Server. So first, the customer leveraged software as a service for their first application, kept the database on-premise, and then second, took their other application, which supported SQL Server, migrated to the virtualized environment while converting to SQL Server, where that application would run on-premise with that database. So there's some hybrid models out there, Jim, that maybe customers don't think about because they think it's all or nothing.
Yeah, and like as we talked about with outages, and customers have asked me, or even in a presentation, what architecturally, what are some of the things, and just at a high level, the hybrid approach is still really the best practice out there. Is that you've got some of it in the cloud, but probably some of it still on-prem.
Now, Jim, we attend at House of Brick, we attend many events and conferences. I recall, I think it was last year, the CEO at Oracle was at Oracle Open World talking about some of the predictions Oracle had, and then polled the audience, and the majority of the audience said none of the above to the poll. So really vendors and their architectures, and no offense to them, but they are trying to pull customers forward, but customers saying not so fast, correct?
That is, and when I look at this slide, it reminds me of something that I like to remind customers, or if I'm presenting, is the cloud has really been defined by the providers. It will be, but it isn't at the point where it's customer driven. So the customer is saying, I need this, and the providers will hustle to get that. And some of the things that customers, the reason that they've kind of taken a step back is really comes around security, and we'll talk more about that. But this slide certainly reminds me of, there's still some apprehension out there. We're still in the early adopter stage.
Well, I think Pete would validate with us if he were available that it works great in PowerPoint sometimes when the vendors present it, but in real life, as we've seen when working with cStor to migrate customers, it may not always be what the vendor suggested. So it's great to bring in a third party, House of Brick, cStor, or otherwise, just to ensure that the reality of what you're trying to accomplish matches what actually these vendor technologies can do.
Yeah, and Bob,
I would definitely agree with that.
Oh, sorry, Pete. And Bob and Pete, I would say that if a customer asks you today, should we be considering the cloud? I think the three of us would all say absolutely. It should be always part of your TCO analysis anytime you're deploying a new app or looking at migrating an app.
Very good. Well, let me pause right now, and Kim or Pete, I didn't know if we had any questions yet or anything else, or we'll just keep going.
We definitely have a question, Bob. We can dive into those, and why don't we start with question 1. Thanks to our audience again for chiming in. If you have more questions, you can still post them to the questions pane. First question, are Oracle databases supported on all cloud providers?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we're going to talk about some specific scenarios here. So I'll use the House of Brick response to that. There are options. I think in running Oracle on cloud today, the biggest challenge, as I mentioned earlier with one of my clients that had cloud analysis paralysis, is Oracle likes to use fear, uncertainty, and doubt to tell their customers that they have to run Oracle in Oracle's cloud. So while there are options to run Oracle on Amazon, to run Oracle on Microsoft Azure, on Google Cloud, and on other cloud platforms, Oracle is really trying to market to their customers to stay on Oracle's cloud for a variety of reasons, and we'll touch more on that here as we go. Great question. Well, let's move forward as we talk about cloud and talk about what are the key cloud questions you should be talking about, both from a private cloud on-premise perspective and for public cloud service providers. First, as we alluded to earlier, what are the key SLA capabilities of those different cloud providers? As we talked about with some of the outages in the past, it's very important to make sure that the availability is very well lined out, and particularly that you get your legal teams involved in ensuring that the SLAs of the public cloud provider align with the SLAs that you have internally. Many of our clients have gone through this, maybe just for test dev to start, but then come to find out that they didn't always have that service available to them. Now the cloud providers are getting better here, and the database support out there is getting better, but you need to make sure that you have very clearly articulated SLAs with public cloud options. Secondly, what are the true costs? And we're going to spend a few minutes here in a bit talking about licensing specifically, but we call out that the costs of cloud, whether you're private cloud on-prem or using a public cloud service provider, your database and application software is generally going to be 3 to 4 times the cost of any of the hardware, much less cloud services cost. So you really need to start at the licensing, because if you find savings there, that can give you opportunities elsewhere. Jim, any thoughts there?
No, actually, I don't have anything to add. I think that was well put.
Okay. And then third and last, can my tier 1 workloads even work in a cloud model, and how? Now, Jim, on this, virtualization, as we've been doing it for a dozen years, we believe you can virtualize any workload. Can you cloudify any workload today?
I've seen some workloads that really just didn't fit. The example I'm thinking of, it had so many tentacle systems out there. Some of them were appliance-based, where maybe how it was routing calls and things like that. So that would certainly presented some challenges. Was it impossible to get to the cloud? No, probably not. But at the time when we were architecting that solution, we just didn't think it made sense at that time. Yep. And I do think, though, Bob, when we look at that, the other thing that people run into is compliance. But again, as this becomes customer needs driven, I think that will start to change, what we can put in the cloud.
Agreed. On this slide, this is one of the most exciting slides for us at House of Brick because of our relationship and experience with VMware, and then again with our partnership with cStor in particular, being able to integrate private and public clouds could really experience a game changer here. It was last year that VMware announced, and they will be publicly speaking to it at VMworld here in a few weeks, about a new partnership with AWS. Now, recognize that VMware used to have their own cloud service, vCloud Air, which they sold off at about the same time. So they had been preparing to go with Amazon as one of their preferred cloud providers, particularly because Amazon's going to provide VMware vSphere integration. What this means essentially, and then with your VMware ELA, VMware Corporate would provide you a managed service of Amazon Web Services resource that appears to you as another vCenter. So essentially, Jim, if a customer has a private cloud based on VMware vSphere, using vCenters to manage that virtualized environment for their database workloads, essentially using AWS through a VMware managed services means they could use vMotion and other tools potentially to expand into the cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, Bob, it's what makes this solution, this technology so exciting, is that in any consulting engagement, I really we encourage customers to think about the tooling that they're going to be using, and you don't want to add a lot of tooling. So this tooling is familiar. It's just like you're sitting in your vSphere client, interacting with vCenter. So that's what makes this so exciting, is that it's the same tooling.
Well, moving through this first section of the webinar, we'll finish up with these cloud best practices. And remember, when we talk about cloud is real and database cloud is possible, what we mean is if your database workloads from application on down are portable with virtualization, you may be cloud ready. Also, you need to ensure in working with partners like cStor that your private cloud infrastructure is scalable and that it could integrate, as we saw in the last slide, with public cloud service providers that may also use similar virtualization technologies. And then lastly, you really need to consider on the private cloud to introduce full automation that may include chargeback or at least showback so that you can recoup some of those costs, especially for database as a service, because of the cost of software licensing for database is probably more than that very infrastructure. So these are some of the key areas in working with partners like cStor and House of Brick. So your checklist is essentially this, and we've talked about most of these already, but I would reiterate the second to last bullet. Pilot your cloud thoroughly, whether it's just on the private on-prem cloud, but particularly in the public cloud space. There are so many unknowns, particularly from a cost perspective. Make sure you pilot first. But in this next section, we're going to talk about the third checkbox, which is the licensing element of architecting cloud options. Now, for those who use Microsoft, and particularly database for Microsoft, based on Microsoft technologies like SQL Server, you're probably the most fortunate in regards to database cloud licensing. Now, this text in the slide is a direct copy from the Microsoft document on license mobility. Basically, with SA, your database license follows your virtual machine wherever it goes, whether on-premise or the cloud. So this is a fantastic feature, and if this webinar were just based on SQL Server database in the cloud, this would be a 3-minute webinar. So with Microsoft SQL Server, you're going to have a lot of flexibility. You still need to follow the checklist in terms of piloting and everything else, but from a licensing perspective with SA, your license follows your virtualized workload in the virtual machine wherever it goes. So this is going to be a great opportunity, in addition to Microsoft providing free licenses for those converting from Oracle and other database platforms to SQL Server, in addition to SQL Server being released with support for Linux. So we're going to see probably, Jim, over the next 2 to 3 years, probably greater and greater adoption of tier 2 and 3 workloads, and maybe even more tier 1 workloads, moving from Oracle or other databases to SQL Server, including cloud. Would you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hearing, I'm seeing, and I'm part of those adoptions. And I can think of the gentleman I talked to at a conference, and he worked for a startup, and for them it just made sense to cloudtize everything. That they knew that was scalable for them. So yeah, absolutely agree with that comment.
Well, here comes the fun part of our webinar today, and that's understanding Oracle Cloud licensing. In fact, this is such a big topic that we have 3 different sessions or panels at VMworld this year in a few weeks, where House of Brick will be presenting and doing boot camps around Oracle licensing, both virtualized and in the cloud. Additionally, House of Brick works with the independent Oracle user group, IOUG, doing many presentations, and most recently was asked to do an article for the Northern California user group magazine on licensing Oracle software in the cloud. So for those of you who'd like to go there, and Kim from cStor can probably include this link, but it's nocoug.org, and click on the link for their most recent magazine and look for licensing Oracle software in the cloud. And we'll go over a lot of the details we'll share today at a high level. But essentially, know these 2 things. One, in reality, Oracle has made very few changes to the actual binding contracts for running in virtualized or cloud environments. And this may seem contrary to what Oracle's saying, to the perception that things are changing all the time, and that's really not true. So the important part there is to know that your contract with Oracle is what matters, and we'll cover some of that here. Currently today, there are three categories of clouds that we see most prominently in terms of what you can do with your database workloads from a public cloud perspective when licensing Oracle databases. First, Oracle authorizes two environments with their cloud policy document, both Microsoft and Azure and Amazon AWS EC2 has quote-unquote benefits of being preferred cloud providers for Oracle database licensing. Oracle, though, obviously has its own cloud environment that it would prefer its customers to use. And in some cases, that may be the more preferable option for many Oracle customers. They provide software as a service, platform infrastructure as a service, and many other options around cloud that for certain, again, Oracle customers may be an option, the better option. However, what we've seen is you need to understand your contract, you need to understand your options, work with agnostic partners like cStor to understand all the platform and public cloud possibilities that are out there. And then lastly, there are some quote-unquote non-authorized but contractually available clouds. As we heard from that first question, with Oracle, you can run Oracle in any cloud, but there are some qualifications to that, and we'll be covering those here, including as a bonus, we'll talk a little more about VMware Cloud on AWS. I don't want to spend too much time on authorized clouds, only that it comes up when Oracle says we have a cloud computing environment policy document. All that means is Oracle has a lot of marketing documents out there. Many have probably heard about the partitioning policy document. However, you need to understand the cloud policy document is a non-contractual document. While it does extend additional privileges beyond the contract, there is a risk. The risk on relying on a non-contractual document is that Oracle can change or revoke those quote-unquote policies at any time, and there may be no recourse to the earlier claims because, again, it was never a contract. So in House of Brick's opinion, running Oracle on any cloud, but particularly on AWS or Azure, should be done with very strategic considerations, but probably not for cost considerations, especially licensing alone. You'll need to look at what it means from using the model of a virtual CPU, for example, in Azure, versus using Oracle's processor licensing. But what we see is by using Amazon or Microsoft's cloud service from a licensing perspective for Oracle database, you're getting half the compute for twice the cost as opposed to just using Oracle on a private cloud. So, Jim, cloud can be expensive for database if you don't pick the right licensing model.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And probably for people just looking at the cloud, probably the most common misconception they have going in is this is absolutely going to be cheaper, and that's not the case. Now, like we talked about with Forbes.com articles, that will shift eventually as this starts to scale up for people.
Correct. So moving from authorized clouds to Oracle Cloud, with Oracle's cloud, you have to pay for the cloud and also for the software licenses, not unlike other clouds. But with most of the other cloud offerings requiring processor-based licensing for Oracle, usually the TCO is going to be better with on-prem solutions. So this is something, particularly from a sizing perspective, which is what I think we've seen in a lot of challenges in working with customers with cStor, is a vendor may say that they don't need as much hardware, or that they just over-provision their hardware without thinking that getting more hardware means more processors, meaning more database licensing, meaning more software costs. So again, in House of Brick's experience, you have to be very careful in looking at Oracle Cloud or Oracle hardware, because the TCO may be more expensive once you get down to the licensing aspect of this, which leads us then to what are some of the other options with other cloud providers. Now, House of Brick has been working with many of these providers, and we mentioned before that VMware recently sold off their vCloud Air assets when they announced their partnership with Amazon. What you need to understand here is, from a bring your own license perspective, it's probably most optimal to review your contract and understand what you can do, whether it's private or public cloud. Now, one of the caveats, and this is where database cloud licensing is possible with caveats, is you really need to make sure that your cloud provider has the mechanisms to help you to ensure that you can monitor your hardware-based license usage. What that means is that they know on which processors Oracle is installed and or running. So it's very important that these cloud providers know you're going to be running Oracle database in their environment in case Oracle were to come around and perform an audit, which they usually do with many clients at least every 2 to 4 years. Now, many customers may stop and say, well, I have a ULA, so I'm covered. Well, we've seen this, and I think, Jim, we had a client recently where we got them off a ULA, and we were able to save them 75% of their cost in doing so. But in getting them off the ULA, I believe the ULA actually said they couldn't use their licenses in cloud, the public cloud.
Yeah, that's correct. It actually said that as part of their contract. So yeah, that's correct.
So House of Brick prefers not going to ULAs, not only because it may not be the best thing if even covered in cloud, but when you architect cloud either for on-prem or off-prem, including public cloud options, we can likely help you architect something to optimize your database license cost, when by extension could provide you cost savings to get more cloud and or private cloud infrastructure. So again, licensing is a very, very important consideration, particularly around Oracle database workloads. Now, we talked a little about VMware Cloud on AWS, and as it relates to what's going on at VMworld here, it's still to be determined whether this is going to be a authorized cloud environment. What we mean is, while AWS EC2 is an authorized cloud with the cloud policy document, VMware's cloud on AWS may not be considered that. So what we're suggesting is bring your own license for Oracle is probably the better option when you're looking at using Oracle on VMware's cloud with AWS. So think of it this way, Jim, if one of our clients has Oracle running on vSphere today in a private cloud environment on premise, that same licensing approach should be applicable if they were to use this new VMware on AWS.
Correct. Yep. Correct. It really, architecturally, it looks just like your vSphere environment. You have your own host, you have your own storage. Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
So it's key to bring in not only a cStor or another third party with like a House of Brick, you really need to consult with your legal teams after you determine your architecture strategy so that legal can work to align the contract entitlements. It's going to be very important that the alignment of the entitlements of licensing to the deployments of licensing in that architecture are 100%. So very important. And again, as a reminder, for more details, check out House of Brick's article at nocug.org. And again, House of Brick will be doing 6 sessions at VMworld. cStor will be there as well. We'd welcome meeting with any of you if you will be there also. So to wrap up, how can House of Brick help? We are a cStor partner, meaning that we work with cStor we're an extension of their services arm, so any integration, managed, or licensed services can be provided within your cStor services agreements. Licensing services are a big part of our business today. We are also looking at both cloud from an on-prem and public cloud perspective, and we're seeing more and more customers starting to do their own internal audits in preparation for Oracle potentially giving them audit notices because they're looking at cloud. We also provide license negotiation and audit support and have many options to help customers who may be going through a current Oracle audit. And lastly, this is where we really shine with our partnership with cStor, is around what your true virtualization and cloud architecture options are. We mentioned don't necessarily just go with the sizing from the vendor and their PowerPoints, but make sure that you do diligence around right-sizing your environment and optimizing performance. Jim, that's probably one of the most criticals in addition to licensing, correct?
Yeah, I agree, and it really, and when you talk about right sizing, it feeds into licensing, or you're being efficient with where you're running and how many cores you're using when it comes to Oracle licensing. And I would add to that, there's third-party vendors getting in the cloud analysis business where it's software as a service, but you log in and they're helping you manage your capacity, what you're using from the cloud, so that you can be efficient with what you're actually paying for. So, like we said, there's the customer demand, what the customer needs is greatly impacting the industry, and the tools and the services are just getting better and better.
Yeah, so Pete, if your customers haven't bought hardware yet, this is probably the best first step. If they already have, we can certainly optimize after the fact to make sure that they don't over provision in terms of their deployment of licensing. But Pete, if you are there, HA and DR, those are big deals for cStor as well, and that's some integration you can do in helping with database architectures, correct?
Absolutely, and that's core to what our business has been for many, many years. Just to tail off of that a little bit, what I see right now is cloud adoption, right? I think all the easy stuff people have done, right? Moving their email out to the cloud, some of those things, but where we're at right now is the hard stuff, and that hard stuff includes the primary applications and the databases and everything else, and I think that's where, the combination between House of Brick and cStor, taking a step back, understanding where the client is, where they want to go, I think there's a ton of value that our clients can get from us.
Exactly, and so in combination, our services can provide not just the infrastructure integration and implementation, but also the database stack implementation and integration. So in closing, remember, cloud is real, both private and public. That database cloud is possible with the right architecture working with the cStor, and that database cloud licensing is doable. But remember those qualifications. Check the article out in the Oracle User Group magazine, and we hope to see you at VMworld. Kim, if there are any other questions.
There actually are. Thank you so much, Bob and Jim and Pete, for your expertise. Just as a quick reminder, we are open for questions. If you have any, you can still submit them to the questions pane. So there are a few coming in. Next question. I have a private cloud already. Do I need to worry about public cloud?
Jim or Pete?
Yeah, I would definitely consider it. And then the reason, the first thing that comes to mind when I'm asked that question is that it gives you that scalability that where you can quickly, if you're doing DR, a public cloud might be a good option for you. If you've got some emerging technologies that you want to look at, you don't have to go buy new hardware. Stick it out in the public cloud for a limited time and look at those technologies. And then I always look at development as it's nothing that's static. During a big rollout, you might have lots of development systems, but a year later you might not need them. So those are really good use cases for considering the public cloud.
Yeah, and Jim, I don't know if we mentioned, but Pete, cStor does DR as a service, don't you?
Absolutely, we do, and that's a great use for a public cloud, even if you have your own private cloud. And then just the flexibility to have, public cloud in your back pocket is another huge asset to the company. If unexpected things happen, if your peak season doesn't look anything like your off-peak season from a business standpoint, do you buy all that private cloud to support it, or do you maybe augment out to the public cloud for the best use, and maybe understanding what applications work best where, and building an infrastructure, including the public cloud, to be able to provide the best service from the business perspective.
And I would just add to that too, Pete. You got me thinking. Another really strong use case that we've seen for public cloud is legacy applications. So like I talked about, you just got done rolling out a new Tier 1 application, but you want the old system around, but you don't necessarily need it on-prem, so you stick it out in the public cloud, and it barely uses any resources, which gives you a lot of value for running that at little cost.
So something that may be end of life, Jim?
Yeah, absolutely. Those have been, I've seen that a few times, yep, and the feedback from the customer was they were really happy they did that. It was the best decision they could have made with the application.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. That actually is a good segue into another question. How can I know if my apps will work in the cloud, and will they work? That might be a great next question for you.
I'll start with that one. And this applies to virtualization as well, and even in looking at migrations or conversions. With applications, you really need to ask the vendor what their support is. A lot of them may have their own software as a service, and if they do, that might be the most preferred option for you, both from a supportability perspective as well as a licensing perspective. So always ask your vendor, but I think the important other part of that is make sure you have your integration partner like a cStor there with you when you're talking to your application vendor, to make sure that you know of all the architectural options, including other public clouds. So again, important that you ask your application vendor what's supported, including database, but also what can you do architecturally, even from a private cloud perspective. Jim or Pete, any other thoughts?
This is Pete. I'll add a little bit to that. I think leveraging the experience of other people that have done it, right? So we work with many customers, many clients, many different opportunities, right, that both House of Brick and cStor are involved in. So if somebody else has gone through that same type of venture with an application, leverage the experience of the people that have done it.
Yeah, I'll just add, and because I do like this question, and I've certainly, I can think of, Bob, one of your customers out in California that I worked with, is we sat down and, I think they thought about the cloud, but I think for them it was just a thought. But to get to the point where we could really determine where this application could run, we sat down and we architected it. We got in a meeting room with a whiteboard, and we spent a day architecting every component and thought about what it does and how it functions with the application. And that gave us an understanding of what architecture infrastructure to build for this application.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. Looks like we'll squeeze in one more question. We've got a little bit of time. Last one. If I have an unlimited license agreement with my database vendor, am I also covered for cloud?
Jim, you want to take that?
Go ahead. But my initial thought is with ULA that the answer would be no, you're not always covered. And yeah, I'll let you run with it, Bob.
And that's exactly it. And as we talked about earlier, Jim, was at one of my clients where the ULA for the customer actually said you cannot use it in cloud. So
right.
We actually recommend that customers avoid cloud at all costs, pun intended, because they can be more costly, and that you can look at a private cloud architecture to first optimize your license deployment, and then with that new processor-based licensing can more flexibly look at some of the public cloud providers, particularly with the new VMware and Amazon announcement. If your private cloud's already VMware based and you're using your Oracle processor-based licensing, well, then you can use that same model because VMware with Amazon's just providing you an additional vCenter based on AWS resources. So those are the things that are going to be fleshed out here, and we'll hear more about it at VMworld. But I think, again, avoid ULAs first. Make sure if you do have a ULA that you check the language because cloud may not be applicable. But more importantly, see maybe if you shouldn't be on a ULA in the first place, get into a processor-based licensing that gives you flexibility to bring your own license.
Excellent. Thank you so much, gentlemen. That actually concludes our questions for today's session. Before we close today's event, I would like to pass it back to Pete for a few important closing points. Pete?
Thank you. Yeah, real quick. Yeah, first off, thank everybody for attending today. But anybody that takes a face-to-face meeting with cStor and or House of Brick here to discuss the topics that we did will receive a $50 gift card. Now, there's a couple of disclaimers, time frames and such on the bottom, but reach out to Chris Krieger. Contact information is below. You will get the slide deck as well to take advantage of a $50 gift card as a continuation of this webinar today. For more information on future events along the cStor TechWise path, you'll see here you can get a monthly newsletter and or hit our website /events, or give us a call. Number is below to find out what's coming up and when, and make sure that you're included in our future topics as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Pete. And again, thank you to our expert partner, Jim and Bob from House of Brick. That actually concludes our event for today. Once again, we'd like to thank everyone for joining us, taking time out of your busy day. We hope to see you on a future cStor event very soon. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you.